Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Space smells like burnt electronics and recycled disappointment, and apparently, nobody mentions that in the recruitment videos. Thalia had been on Quantum Meadow for 8 months now, and the glamour of intergalactic agricultural research had worn off approximately 8 months ago. Turned out, growing tomatoes in 0.3 gravity for alien species who mostly thought tomatoes tasted like sadness paste wasn't the adventure the recruitment videos promised. But hey, the contract paid well. Enough to clear her debts back on Earth. Enough to maybe, possibly, start over somewhere that wasn't constantly reminding her of everything she'd walked away from. So here she was, trimming bioluminescent wheat at 2 in the morning station time, alone in Biodome Section 9, wondering if this was what a midlife crisis looked like when you were only 36. The wheat glowed a soft blue-green, genetically modified to photosynthesize under 3 different star types. Beautiful, really. Useless for human consumption, but beautiful. Kind of like her entire career, now that she thought about it. Snip, snip, snip. The sound of her shears cutting through stalks echoed in the massive dome. Most species on the station slept during this cycle, which was exactly why Thalia preferred it. Fewer bureaucrats asking her to fill out forms in triplicate. Fewer overly cheerful scientists trying to network over synthetic coffee that tasted like regret. Just her, the plants, and the gentle hum of the atmospheric processors. Snip, snip. She froze. There, between the rows of luminescent grain, something moved. Not the automated drones that usually patrolled for pests. Something bigger. Something that moved with purpose. Low to the ground, silent except for the whisper of stalks parting. Thalia's hand went to the emergency beacon on her belt. Slowly. Station regulations were clear. Unauthorized fauna in the agricultural zones meant immediate lockdown. Some species on Quantum Meadow had dietary requirements that didn't play well with others. The movement stopped. Then, from between 2 rows of wheat about 5 meters away, a head emerged. Thalia's breath caught. She knew what this was. You didn't work on an intergalactic station without learning to identify the potentially lethal species. This was a Carinth juvenile. And oh, wow, okay, this was definitely not supposed to be here. The creature was roughly the size of a large dog, maybe a golden retriever, but that's where any resemblance to Earth animals ended. 6 legs, each ending in retractable claws that she couldn't see but absolutely knew were there. Midnight blue fur with streaks of silver that caught the wheat's bioluminescence, making it look like a piece of the night sky had decided to go for a walk. The head was broad, almost feline, with oversized eyes that reflected the dim light like mirrors. Those eyes locked onto hers. Thalia had read the briefings. Carinth were apex predators from Charon Prime, a planet where everything evolved to either hunt or be hunted, and the Carinth had definitively won that evolutionary arms race. Adults stood nearly 3 meters tall, could run down prey at speeds that made cheetahs look lazy, and had recently joined the galactic community with a reputation that made even the warrior species nervous. Their young were supposed to be closely supervised. Always, because juvenile Carinth, while smaller, still had all those lovely predatory instincts and approximately 0 impulse control, and one was currently staring at her like she was either very interesting or very delicious, and honestly, Thalia wasn't sure which option she preferred. Nice, alien, puppy, she tried, her voice barely above a whisper. The cub tilted its head. The movement was so perfectly dog-like that Thalia almost laughed, except laughing felt like a bad idea when something with that many teeth was watching you. "You're not supposed to be here," she continued, keeping her voice calm. "Like really not supposed to be here. Where's your handler? Your parent? Your pack elder? Whatever you beings, have? The cub sat down, just plopped its haunches right there in the wheat, and continued staring. Thalia waited. The cub waited. The wheat glowed peacefully, completely unconcerned with the interspecies standoff happening in its midst. "Okay," Thalia said finally. "Okay, I'm just going to back away. Slowly. And you're going to stay right there. And we're both going to pretend this never happened. And I'm definitely not going to report this because the paperwork would be nightmarish." She took one step backward. The cub's ears, she was pretty sure they were ears, the triangular things on top of its head, swiveled toward her, but it didn't move. Another step. Still nothing. 3 more steps, and she was at the section door. She palmed the control panel, and the door hissed open. One last glance back showed the cub still sitting there, watching her with those impossibly large eyes. Thalia stepped through the door and let it seal behind her. She leaned against the wall of the corridor and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Well," she muttered to the empty hallway. That was weird. The next night, Thalia debated calling in sick. She had about 300 hours of unused sick leave. One of the perks of having absolutely no social life was never needing mental health days. But calling in sick meant explaining why. And explaining why meant paperwork. And paperwork meant Administrator Waverly getting involved, and that woman could make filling out a lunch order feel like a war crime. So Thalia went to work. She entered Section 9 cautiously, shears in one hand, emergency beacon in the other. The wheat glowed peacefully. No movement, no midnight blue predators lurking in the grain. She let out a relieved breath and got to work. 2 hours into her shift, she felt it. That prickle on the back of her neck. The one humans had evolved specifically to tell them when something was watching. She turned slowly. The cub sat at the end of the row, maybe 10 meters away. Just sitting, watching. "Oh, come on," Thalia groaned. "Don't you have somewhere else to be? Someone else to stalk? This is getting creepy, you know that?" The cub tilted its head again. Still didn't move. Thalia tried to ignore it. She really did. But it's hard to focus on pruning techniques when you can feel predator eyes boring into your back. Every time she glanced over, the cub was still there. Same position, same intense stare. When her shift ended and she headed for the exit, she heard the soft padding of feet behind her. Not close. Maybe 15, 20 meters back. But definitely following. She spun around. The cub stopped, sat down, and looked at her with what she could swear was feigned innocence. "No," Thalia said firmly, pointing at it like she would a misbehaving dog. "No following. Bad. Whatever you are. Go home." The cub blinked slowly. Thalia gave up and went to her quarters. The cub didn't follow into the residential wing, thank God for small mercies, but she had the distinct feeling it was out there somewhere, waiting. She was right. Night 3. The cub was in Section 9 when she arrived. Night 4. It followed her to the supply closet on Deck 8. Night 5. She found it sitting outside the cafeteria during her lunch break, and when she came out, it followed her back to work at a discreet distance. By Night 6, Thalia was ready to admit she had a problem. "So let me get this straight," Bronwyn said, leaning back in her chair in the security office, looking like she hadn't slept in a week, which, knowing station security hours, she probably hadn't. "You've got a Corinth juvenile following you around like a lost puppy, and you're just now reporting it?" "I'm not reporting it," Thalia corrected. "I'm asking for advice. Off the record. As a friend." "We're friends?" Bronwyn raised an eyebrow. We share the same shift time and mutual contempt for station bureaucracy. That's basically friendship in space. Bronwyn snorted. Fair enough. Okay, unofficial advice? It's probably imprinted on you. Imprinted? Like a baby duck? Kind of, yeah. Corinth young form attachments to mentors who teach them hunting and survival skills. Usually it's pack elders, but sometimes... She shrugged. Sometimes they fixate on someone else. No idea why it picked you, though. No offense. None taken, I think, Talia muttered. So what do I do about it? Honestly, nothing. It's not hurting anyone, right? Not being aggressive? No, it just stares and follows. It's unnerving. Welcome to having a pet, Bronwyn grinned. Or being adopted by one. With the Corinth, it's hard to tell who's domesticating who. Talia left the security office feeling distinctly unreassured. The next person she consulted was Amari, because misery loves company, and Amari was the closest thing she had to a work friend. He was waiting for her in Section 5, where they were supposed to be collaborating on a cross-pollination project that neither of them particularly cared about. "Oh, my stars, you have a shadow!" Amari practically squealed when she told him. He was somehow always cheerful, even at ungodly station hours, which Thalia found both admirable and exhausting. "That's adorable!" "It's not adorable. It's a predator, an alien predator." "An alien predator, baby," Amari corrected. "Look, I know you're all grumpy and cynical and I hate space, but this is actually really cool. Corinth are incredible. They're brilliant, loyal, and their cultural bonds are supposedly unbreakable. If one chose you, it didn't choose me, it just showed up. That's choosing you." Amari was already pulling out his datapad. "I'm researching this. Oh, and I'm bringing treats tomorrow. Do they eat meat? They definitely eat meat. I'll replicate something. Please don't encourage it." But Amari did encourage it. The next night he showed up in Section 9 with a plate of what looked like synthetic beef and the excitement of a kid at a petting zoo. The cub appeared within minutes. Seriously, how did it always know where she was? And Amari made cooing noises that would have been embarrassing for anyone over the age of 8. "Here you go, little guy or girl. Do Corinth have genders like humans? Thalia, do you know?" "I don't know, Amari." The cub approached, sniffed the meat, and then walked right past it, ignored it completely, sat down in its usual spot, about 5 meters from Thalia, and resumed staring at her. "Huh," Amari said, deflated. "That's weird." "That's what I've been saying," Thalia muttered. But as the weeks passed, Thalia had to admit, only to herself, never out loud, that she was getting used to it. The cub, the following, the constant presence just at the edge of her vision. She started calling it Bug in her head, because it bugged her, and because giving it a proper name felt too much like attachment. Bug only appeared when she was alone. Never when Amari was around for more than a few minutes, never when other crew members were nearby. Just when Thalia was by herself in the domes or the corridors during the quiet hours. And Bug never made a sound. No growls, no purrs, no chittering or whatever noises Corinth made. Just silence, and those enormous, watching eyes. Against her better judgment, Thalia started talking to it. At first just muttering complaints about the station's terrible recycled air, about Earth's increasingly depressing news feeds, about how her mother's messages were getting shorter and less frequent, and that probably meant something bad. Then, longer stories. About her life before, about the engagement that fell apart when she admitted she felt more alive around plants than people, about how she'd applied to Quantum Meadow on a whim and been accepted on an even bigger whim, and how she sometimes wondered if running away to space was brave or just cowardly with extra steps. Bug never responded, just listened, tilted its head occasionally, stayed exactly where it always stayed, close enough to watch, far enough to not intrude. And weirdly, oddly, inexplicably, it helped. Thalia didn't tell anyone about the talking. That felt too personal, too vulnerable. This was her weird alien stalker situation, and she'd handle it her way. Which mostly meant ignoring the growing fondness she felt every time those reflective eyes blinked at her from the shadows. Absolutely nothing could go wrong with that plan. Week 3 of the bug situation, and Thalia had developed a routine, which was insane, because you shouldn't have routines involving alien predators. But here she was anyway, living her best terrible life choices. Bug appeared every night within 10 minutes of her shift starting, always in whatever section she was working, always maintaining that exact 5-meter distance, like there was an invisible fence only it could see, and always, always watching. The weird part, well, the additional weird part, was that Bug only showed up when Thalia was alone, completely alone. The moment another person entered her work area, Bug vanished. Not fled, not ran away, just wasn't there anymore. Like it had never existed in the first place. Thalia tested this theory on night 22. She waited until Bug settled into its usual spot, then called Amari on her comm and asked him to bring her a tool from storage. 3 minutes later, when Amari walked through the section door, Bug was gone. She'd been watching it the entire time, and she still couldn't say exactly when it disappeared. 1 second there, next second not. Amari looked around hopefully. "Where's your little friend?" "Not here," Thalia said, which was technically true and completely unhelpful. After Amari left, Bug reappeared. Same spot, same unnerving stare. "You're very weird," Thalia informed it. "Just so you know." Bug blinked slowly, which was apparently its response to everything. The food thing remained bizarre too. Amari kept trying, bless his persistent, cheerful heart, bringing different meats, fish, even replicated Corinth cuisine he'd found in the station database. Bug sniffed each offering politely and ignored every single one. "Maybe it's not hungry," Amari suggested on night 28, staring dejectedly at another rejected meal. "It's a growing predator," Thalia said. "It's definitely hungry. It's just not hungry for your food." "Then what does it eat?" Thalia had been wondering the same thing. She'd started checking station logs, looking for any reports of missing supplies, livestock, or, she really hoped not, crew members. Nothing. Either Bug was the galaxy's pickiest eater, or it was getting food somewhere else. Or, the thought occurred to her with some discomfort, it wasn't actually a juvenile. Maybe it was a very small, very patient adult Corinth waiting for the right moment to... No, that was paranoia talking. Probably. By week 5, Thalia had fallen completely into the habit of talking to Bug. Not just complaining anymore, but actual conversations. One-sided conversations, sure, but conversations nonetheless. "Got a message from my mother today," she said on night 33, pruning a particularly stubborn vine in section 6. Bug sat in its spot near the irrigation controls, ears forward. "She's sick. Has been for a while, apparently, but didn't want to tell me because she knew I'd worry. Which, thanks, that's totally better than just telling me up front." Bug tilted its head. "And here's the fun part," Thalia continued, snipping harder than necessary. "I can't afford to break my contract. Not without penalties that would put me right back where I started, debt-wise. So I'm stuck here, growing alien vegetables, while my mother deals with whatever's wrong with her. She didn't even say what it is, and I'm supposed to just... what? Send cheerful messages? Pretend everything's fine?" The vine snapped. Thalia stared at the broken stem in her hand and felt something crack inside her chest, too. This was supposed to be a fresh start. she said quietly. Get away from Earth, clear my head, make enough money to figure out what comes next. And instead, I'm more stuck than I've ever been. And the only one who listens to me is an alien that won't even eat free food. Bug made no response, just kept watching with those huge, reflective eyes that seemed to catch every flicker of the dome's grow lights. Thalia sat down right there in the dirt between the planter boxes. Very professional, very dignified. Exactly what a 36-year-old botanist should be doing at 3 in the morning on a space station in the middle of nowhere. She put her head in her hands and tried very hard not to cry, because crying was pointless and solved nothing. And she'd learned a long time ago that tears were just water you couldn't afford to waste. The sound of movement made her look up. Bug had changed position. For the first time since this whole thing started, it had moved closer. Not much, maybe half a meter, but enough that the distance between them was noticeably different. It sat there, perfectly still, and something about its posture radiated, what? Concern? Attention? Understanding? Thalia laughed, but it came out wet and broken. What am I even doing? Talking to you like you understand. Like you care. You're probably just here because I smell interesting, or I'm near food sources, or some biological reason that has nothing to do with... She stopped, because the question that had been building in her mind for weeks suddenly demanded to be asked, out loud, to this creature that couldn't answer her, that had never made a single sound in her presence. Why? Thalia asked. Her voice cracked on the word. Why do you follow me everywhere? What do you want from me? Bug stared at her, those enormous eyes unblinking, reflecting her own face back at her in miniature. Its ears swiveled slightly, tracking sounds she couldn't hear. Its tail, she'd almost forgotten it had a tail, curled around its 6 legs in a gesture that looked almost protective. And then Bug did absolutely nothing. Just sat there, in complete, total silence. But somehow that silence felt like an answer. Not the answer she wanted, maybe not even an answer she understood, but an answer nonetheless. The kind of answer that said, I'm here, I'm staying, that's enough. Thalia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You're absolutely no help, you know that? Bug's tail twitched. Might have been agreement, might have been a fly. Hard to tell with alien body language. Come on, Thalia said, hauling herself to her feet. I've got 6 more hours of work to pretend to do while having an existential crisis. You coming? Bug stood and followed at its usual distance, which had somehow reset to the standard 5 meters now that the moment had passed. The next day, or what passed for day on a station that ran on arbitrary shift schedules, Thalia decided she needed actual answers, not the silent, possibly profound, possibly meaningless kind. The kind that came with facts and data, and preferably an explanation for why her life had become this weird. She went to Administrator Waverly's office, which was a choice she immediately regretted the moment the door opened. Waverly was human, late 50s, and had the kind of face that suggested she'd been born annoyed, and it had only gotten worse from there. Her office was aggressively beige, her desk was militarily organized, and her smile was the kind that made you want to check if your wallet was still in your pocket. Thalia, Waverly said, not looking up from her data pad. This is unexpected. Is there a problem with your section? No, the plants are fine. I had a question about station wildlife protocols. That got Waverly's attention. Wildlife? Specifically regarding Corinth juveniles. Are they allowed in agricultural zones unsupervised? Something flickered across Waverly's face. Too quick to read, but definitely there. What an odd question. Why do you ask? Just curious. Hypothetically speaking. Hypothetically, Waverly repeated, her smile tightening. All fauna aboard Quantum Meadow are properly registered and monitored. If you've seen something concerning, you should file a formal report. And if I were to file such a report, it would be investigated thoroughly. Forms would need to be completed in triplicate, witness statements recorded, security footage reviewed, biological hazard assessments conducted. Waverly's smile grew. The investigation alone would take approximately 60 to 80 hours of your personal time, plus written documentation. All standard procedure, of course. Of course. The station's favorite weapon? Bureaucratic exhaustion. Thank you for your time, Talia said, already backing toward the door. Thalia? Waverly called as she reached the threshold. If this is about something serious, proper channels exist for a reason. Don't bother security with non-issues. Non-issues. Right. Thalia found Bronwyn in the security office, 3 cups of what might have been coffee lined up on her desk in various stages of consumption. Let me guess, Bronwyn said without looking up. More questions about your furry shadow? How did you... Security officer. It's literally my job to notice things. Also, Amari won't shut up about it. He showed me pictures. He took pictures? Bad ones, very blurry. The tail was in focus, though. Bronwyn finally looked up. What do you need? Information. Off the record. Who's Bug's registered guardian? Bronwyn's expression shifted. That's not off-the-record information. Which means you know. A long pause. Then Bronwyn sighed and pulled up something on her screen. Fine. Guardian is listed as Kilmath, Corinth ambassador currently on diplomatic assignment in the outer sectors. Been gone for months. Expected back. No date listed. So Bug's been alone this whole time? Technically, no. There's a care rotation system for juveniles whose adults are off station, but... Bronwyn hesitated. Look, I probably shouldn't tell you this. When has that ever stopped you? Fair point. Bronwyn leaned back. There was an incident. About 3 months ago, before you started noticing your little friend. Systems failure in the environmental controls. Bad one. Multiple casualties before they got it contained. Talia's stomach dropped. How many casualties? 12. Various species. Bronwyn's voice went flat, the way it did when she was trying not to feel things. Including 2 Corinth researchers. They were working in the xenobiology labs. Bug's parents? Can't confirm that officially. But the timing matches, and suddenly there's a juvenile with no rotation schedule and an absent guardian. Bronwyn met her eyes. Whatever that little thing went through, it was alone for it. Still is, technically. Talia thought about Bug's silence, its constant watching, the way it only appeared when she was alone, as if it understood isolation in a way most beings didn't. Thanks, she said quietly. Don't thank me. I just broke about 6 protocols telling you that. Bronwyn picked up one of her cups and grimaced. Also, if Waverly asks, we never had this conversation. What conversation? Bronwyn's grin was tired but genuine. See, this is why we're friends. That night, Thalia went to Section 9 with a new weight in her chest. Bug appeared right on schedule, settling into position like always. But now Thalia saw it differently. Not an annoying stalker or a weird mystery or even a potential danger. Just another lost thing, trying to find its place in the spaces between stars. Hey, Bug, she said softly. I'm sorry for whatever happened to you, for not understanding sooner. Bug tilted its head, and for the first time, Talia thought she saw something in those reflective eyes that wasn't. Just her own image staring back. Recognition, maybe. Or understanding. Or maybe just the reflection of 2 beings who knew what it meant to be alone in the dark, finding something like companionship in the quiet hours when everyone else slept. Things started going wrong on night 41. Small things at first. Thalia arrived at Section 8 to find the irrigation system running at full blast, flooding the floor with nutrient solution that absolutely should not have been flooding the floor. She shut it down manually, filed a maintenance report, and chalked it up to aging equipment on a station that had definitely seen better decades. Night 43. A power fluctuation in Section 5 killed half the lighting grid. Not dangerous, just annoying and expensive. Maintenance grumbled about worn circuits. Night 46. The atmospheric processor in Section 11 started pumping out air that was technically breathable but smelled like burnt plastic and mistakes. Thalia evacuated the section and spent 3 hours in a hazmat suit while technicians fixed whatever had failed this time. "Bad luck," Amari said, helping her clean contaminated soil samples. "Stuff breaks. That's space stations for you." But Talia was noticing something else. Something that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up in that ancient primate warning that predators were watching. Bug was acting different, not following different. Still the same pattern, same distance, same silent observation. But its body language had changed. The ears were constantly swiveling, tracking sounds. Its tail was low and tense. And twice now, Thalia had caught it positioning itself between her and equipment that later malfunctioned. The irrigation flood? Bug had been pacing near that control panel an hour before it failed, making a low sound in its throat that Thalia had never heard before. The power fluctuation? Bug had physically nudged her away from a junction box 30 seconds before sparks started flying. The atmospheric incident in Section 11 was the worst. Thalia had been walking toward the section entrance when Bug did something it had never done before. It moved directly into her path, not aggressive, not threatening, but absolutely blocking her way. When she tried to step around it, Bug shifted position, blocking her again. "Bug! What?" The alarm started wailing before she finished the sentence. Emergency lights flashed. The section door sealed automatically. If she'd been inside when that air processor failed, she would have breathed in enough contaminants to put her in medical for a week. Bug had stopped her from going in. Bug had known. Thalia stared at the creature sitting calmly in the corridor, its oversized eyes reflecting the emergency lights. "How did you know?" Bug, as usual, said nothing. But this time, the silence felt less like an answer and more like a secret. Night 51. And Thalia couldn't ignore the pattern anymore. She pulled up the station incident logs on her personal terminal, cross-referencing every malfunction over the past 2 months. The official reports blamed age, wear, budget cuts, standard mechanical failure. Nothing suspicious, nothing coordinated. But when she mapped the incidents on a station schematic, they formed a pattern, all in agricultural sections, all during night shift hours, all conveniently explained away as independent failures, and all of them in places where Thalia worked. She sat back in her quarters, staring at the screen, feeling cold despite the regulated temperature. Someone was sabotaging station equipment. Someone was doing it systematically. And somehow, she was either the target or the scapegoat. And Bug knew. The next night, Thalia didn't go straight to work. She went to Bronwyn's office instead, and this time she wasn't asking casual questions. "I need you to review security footage," she said without preamble. "Sections 5, 8, and 11, 2 hours before each malfunction over the past month." Bronwyn looked up from her perpetual coffee, actually alert for once. "That's specific. What am I looking for?" "Tampering. Sabotage. Someone who shouldn't be there." "That's a serious accusation, Thalia. I know what I'm saying. Can you check or not?" Bronwyn studied her for a long moment, then turned to her console. Her fingers danced over the controls, pulling up archived feeds. They watched together in silence as grainy footage played across the screen. Section 8, 3 hours before the flood. Nothing unusual. Standard maintenance drone patrol, empty corridors. Section 5, 2 hours before the power failure. Same thing. Automated systems, no personnel. Section 11, 90 minutes before the atmospheric incident. Bronwyn paused the feed. There. A figure in maintenance coveralls, face obscured by a standard work helmet, doing something to the processor's external panel. The angle was wrong to see exactly what, but they were definitely accessing systems they shouldn't have been. "Can you identify them?" Talia asked. Bronwyn's fingers flew. No ID badge ping, no logged work order for that section at that time. No. She trailed off, then swore quietly. No facial recognition, because someone disabled that camera's biometric scanner remotely, right before this person showed up. "Can you trace the disable command?" "Give me a minute." More typing, more screens flashing past. Then Bronwyn went very still. "This is coming from an administrative terminal." "Which one?" Bronwyn looked at her, and Talia saw the exact moment her friend realized what this meant. Waverly's office. The world seemed to tilt sideways. That doesn't make sense. Why would the station administrator sabotage her own station? "I don't know. But this override code is registered to her terminal and—" Bronwyn pulled up more data. There are 17 other incidents over the past 6 months, all signed off as mechanical failure, all investigated by teams Waverly personally assigned, all concluded with minimal repairs and maximum insurance payouts. Insurance fraud? Or something bigger? Station property values have been dropping. There have been rumors about corporate buyouts, hostile acquisitions. Bronwyn rubbed her face. If someone wanted to drive down Quantum Meadows' value to buy it cheap, causing expensive accidents would be a good strategy. Talia thought about Bug, about how it had shown up around the same time as these incidents started escalating, about how it had protected her, warned her, positioned itself between her and danger every single time. "Bug's been trying to tell me," she whispered. "This whole time. It witnessed the original accident. It knows what happened. And it's been protecting me because I work the shifts when these things happen." Bronwyn looked confused. "Bug?" "The Carinth juvenile. It's not following me because of imprinting or curiosity. It's following me because it knows someone's causing these failures, and I'm in the danger zone." "Talia, that's... Actually, that makes a terrifying amount of sense." Bronwyn stood up. "We need to contact Kilmath. If Bug witnessed sabotage, if it has information about what killed its parents, that's not just evidence. That's testimony. Carinth memory is photographic. Their young can recall events perfectly. That's admissible in Galactic Court." "Can you reach Kilmath?" "I can send an emergency diplomatic signal. If Bug's guardian thinks its ward is in danger or has critical information, they'll come, fast." Bronwyn was already composing the message. "This is going to get messy. Waverly has connections, resources. If she realizes we know—" "Then we don't tell her we know," Talia said. "Business as usual. I go to work, you investigate quietly, and we wait for Kilmath." "And if Waverly makes another move before then?" Talia thought about Bug's silent vigil, its constant protection, the way it had saved her life multiple times without her even realizing. "Then I trust that I've got the galaxy's most stubborn guardian watching my back." Bronwyn hit send on the diplomatic message. Message away. Marked priority urgent. Now we wait. How long? For a Carinth who thinks their ward is threatened? Bronwyn's smile was grim. Not long. They take protection of their young very, very seriously. If Kilmath is anywhere within 3 systems, we'll know within days. Talia went to work that night with new eyes. Bug appeared as always, but now she understood. This wasn't a pet or a stalker or a mystery. This was a survivor, trying to prevent more deaths the only way it knew how. She knelt down, still maintaining that 5-meter distance Bug seemed to need. "I know," she said softly. "I know what you saw. I know what you've been doing. And I'm sorry it took me so long to understand. But help is coming. Your guardian is coming. And we're going to make this right." Bug's ears swiveled forward. Its tail lifted slightly. And for the first time in 51 nights, it stood up and walked 1 meter closer. Still not touching distance, but closer than it had ever chosen to be. Close enough that Talia could see the silver streaks in its fur catch the grow lights, could see the depth of intelligence in those enormous eyes, could see the small, frightened child beneath the predator's body. "We've got this," Talia promised. "Together." Bug sat down in its new position, and something in its posture relaxed, just slightly, just enough. 3 nights later, Kilmeth arrived on Quantum Meadow like a storm given form and fury, and absolutely everything changed. Kilmeth was terrifying in the way that ancient mountains are terrifying, not because of what they do, but because of what they are. The Carinth ambassador stood nearly 3 meters tall, covered in fur so dark it seemed to absorb light, with scars that spoke of battles Thalia couldn't imagine. When it spoke, the translator rendered its voice as gravel grinding against stone. "Where is my ward?" Bug shot out from behind a planter box in Section 9 like it had been fired from a cannon. The reunion was not what Talia expected. No dramatic leaping, no crying. Could Carinth cry? No nuzzling or obvious affection. Bug simply walked up to Kilmeth, sat down precisely 1 meter away, and stared up at its guardian with those enormous eyes. Kilmeth stared back. The silence stretched for 30 seconds that felt like 30 years. Then Kilmeth made a sound, a series of clicks and low rumbles that the translator didn't even attempt to parse. Bug responded with its own sounds, the first Thalia had ever heard it make. A conversation in a language of gesture and scent and noises that spoke of things words couldn't touch. "Your ward has been protecting me," Talia said when the exchange finished. "I think it saw what happened to its parents. I think it knows who's responsible." Kilmeth turned its massive head toward her, and being the focus of that predatory attention made every prey instinct in Thalia's body scream. "My ward tells me you showed it kindness, that you spoke to it as an equal, that you shared your pain without expectation." "I talked to it, yes. Didn't know it was listening that closely." "Carinth young understand far more than they can express." Kilmeth looked back at Bug. "My ward's parents died in what your station called mechanical failure. I was told there was nothing suspicious, that it was tragedy, not crime." "They lied," Bronwyn said, stepping into the section with a data pad. "We have evidence, lots of it. Your ward was collecting proof this whole time. Damaged components, scent trails, behavioral patterns, and security footage showing Administrator Waverly orchestrating the sabotage." Kilmeth's growl made the deck plates vibrate. "Show me." The confrontation in Waverly's office was brief and devastating. Bronwyn presented the evidence. Kilmeth provided Bug's testimony, translated through gestures and sounds that built a perfect picture of events. Bug had been with its parents when the atmospheric processor was tampered with, had seen the maintenance uniform, had memorized the scent, had watched them die while hiding in a ventilation shaft too small for adults, had spent 3 months gathering evidence and protecting the one human who'd treated it like a person instead of a problem. Waverly tried to deny it, tried to spin it as circumstantial, tried to pull rank and threaten legal action. Then Kilmeth leaned across the desk, all 3 meters and scores of scars and barely contained fury, and said in that grinding stone voice, "You killed my packkin. You endangered my ward. You will answer for this in courts that do not forgive." Waverly's face went white. Station security, the real security, not the ones on Waverly's payroll, arrived within minutes. The arrest was quiet and efficient, and absolutely final. 2 days later, after statements and reports and enough paperwork to kill a lesser bureaucrat, Thalia found herself in a station conference room with Kilmath and Bug. "My ward wishes to remain with you," Kilmath said without preamble. Thalia blinked. "What?" "In Corinth culture, young choose their mentors. My ward chose you, spoke to you, shared silence with you, protected you. These are sacred bonds." "But I don't know anything about raising a Corinth. I can barely take care of plants." "You spoke to my ward as an equal when it could not speak back. You shared your true self. You asked it why." Kilmath's massive head tilted in a gesture that reminded Thalia startlingly of Bug. "That is more than knowledge. That is understanding." Thalia looked at Bug, who was sitting in its customary spot, now about 2 meters away instead of 5, progress, watching her with those reflective eyes. "This is insane," Thalia said. "I came to space to run away from responsibility, to figure out my life, to not be tied down to anything." Bug's tail swished once. Kilmath said nothing. "And you're telling me I'd be responsible for a juvenile apex predator, who will grow up to be massive and terrifying and probably capable of eating me if I mess up its upbringing?" "Yes," Kilmath confirmed, "and I'd have to learn your cultural protocols, child-rearing practices, probably a whole language made of clicks and growls." "Yes. This is the worst plan I've ever heard." Thalia rubbed her face. Thought about Bug sitting in the dark for 3 months, watching and protecting and waiting. Thought about how she'd talked to it about her mother, her failures, her fears. Thought about that moment when she'd asked why, and Bug had answered with silence that somehow meant everything. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Okay. Yes, Bug can stay." Bug's ears perked up, its tail lifted, and it made that sound again, the rumbling purr Thalia had only heard once before. Kilmath's expression, if Corinth had expressions, seemed satisfied. "You honor my ward's choice. You honor my pack." Kilmath stood. "I will return periodically to teach you both. Until then, trust your instincts. My ward already does." 3 weeks later, Thalia was back in Section 9, teaching Bug about Earth tomatoes. Bug remained spectacularly unimpressed, sniffing the fruit and making a sound that the translator helpfully rendered as, "Why does this exist?" "Because humans are weird," Thalia answered. "Get used to it." Amari was taking pictures from a safe distance, making cooing noises that Bug ignored with impressive dignity. Bronwyn stopped by with coffee, real coffee this time, shipped from Earth as a thank you for breaking the case, and watched the scene with amusement. "You know," Bronwyn said, "I've never seen you smile like that." "Like what?" "Like you're actually happy to be here." Thalia looked at Bug, who was now attempting to dig up a tomato plant for reasons known only to juvenile Corinth. "Yeah, well, turns out having someone follow you everywhere isn't the worst thing in the universe." Bug abandoned the tomato and trotted over, sitting down just half a meter away now. Close enough that Thalia could reach out and touch the soft fur between its ears, which Bug allowed with patient tolerance. "You ridiculous furball," Thalia said softly. "I'm glad you followed me everywhere. I'm glad you sat beside me in silence. I'm glad you're here." Bug purred, that deep rumbling sound that meant home and safety and understanding. It rested its head on its paws, eyes half closed, completely relaxed, in a way it had never been before. And Thalia realized something that made her laugh out loud. She'd come to space looking for an escape, and found a purpose instead. In the last place she expected it, with the last creature she'd ever imagined. Sometimes the best answers come without words. Sometimes, presence is everything. And sometimes, getting adopted by an alien predator puppy is exactly what you need to remember how to be human. Bug sneezed on her boot. Thalia grinned. Yeah, exactly what she needed.